In the world of nursing, unpredictability is part of the job. Every shift brings new challenges, a mix of routine and the unexpected, with moments that test not only your professional skills, but also your composure. I had thought I'd seen it all, but nothing could have prepared me for what unfolded the day I encountered Mr. Smith. It started like any other, just a standard checkup in a quiet hospital room. But as soon as I stepped inside, a sense of unease began to creep in, turning what should have been an ordinary interaction into something far more complex and unsettling. I stepped into the compact, faintly illuminated hospital chamber, my heart pulsating a tad swifter. This wasn't my initial experience aiding a patient, but there was something distinctly unique about this scenario. As a nurse, I had witnessed much, but nothing could have readied me for what was about to transpire. Mr. Smith was a reserved man in his 40s who typically kept to himself. He had arrived for standard checkups, and I was meant to assist him in preparing for the subsequent examination. Upon entering the room, I noticed he was acting somewhat anxiously, squirming on the bed as if discomfort. "Is everything fine, Mr. Smith?" I inquired with a gentle smile, attempting to alleviate the tension. He nodded, but I could discern something amiss. As I neared to help him adjust his hospital gown, my eyes caught sight of something plainly visible through the material, and for an instant, I was immobilized. It was not what I had anticipated seeing, not in the least. My face reddened, but I swiftly reminded myself to remain professional. I was a nurse, and such occurrences happened. "Let's just prepare you for the doctor," I said, endeavoring to disregard the awkwardness. But as I extended my hand to adjust his gown, he shifted again, and abruptly the fabric slipped entirely, exposing everything. I gasped, uncertain of how to react. My thoughts raced as I tried to comprehend the situation. Should I mention something? Should I depart? Just at that juncture, the door squeaked open and another nurse peered inside. "Oh, pardon me, I didn't intend to intrude," she stated hastily before exiting the room. I couldn't fathom how close she had come to witnessing what I had just seen. After her departure, I turned back to Mr. Smith, sensing the tension escalate even further. He appeared mortified, but there was something additional in his gaze that concerned me. "I'm truly sorry," he uttered in a quavering voice. I strove to maintain composure, but internally I was still disconcerted. "It's all right. Let's just ready you for the examination," I said. Yet as I turned to gather some supplies, I felt his hand lightly graze mine. I froze once more. Was it unintentional, or was he attempting to communicate some sort of sign? Just then, when I believed the situation couldn't grow any more peculiar, the door swung open once more. This time it was the doctor. He entered, completely oblivious to the awkwardness that had just unfurled. "Is everything all right here?" the doctor questioned, glancing at both of us. I nodded, promptly stepping back to allow the doctor to perform his duties. But even as I exited the room, I couldn't dismiss the sensation that something was awry. I kept reflecting on Mr. Smith's expression and his conduct. Later that very day, while I was carrying out my routine tasks, I got a notification that Mr. Smith had requested me explicitly for his subsequent examination. My stomach clenched. Why did he want me? Was it merely because I had been present before? Or was there more to it? The following day, I re-entered his room, attempting to behave normally, but the instant our gazes locked, I recognized the tension still lingered. He grinned at me, yet it wasn't the anxious grin from earlier. It was nearly a self-assured smile. "I've been contemplating about you," he murmured, and my heart missed a beat. I attempted a laugh, but my thoughts whirled. "Let's concentrate on getting you through the examination," I stated, striving to steer the situation back to professionalism. Yet just as I extended my hand to adjust his foredrip, the door opened once more. This time it was Mr. Smith's spouse. My heart halted. She stepped in, glanced at me, then at him, and I instantly perceived she detected something amiss. Her eyes constricted, and unease permeated the room. I swiftly apologized and exited before anything further could transpire. But as I strode down the hallway, I couldn't dispel the sensation that this wasn't concluded. I resumed my rounds, trying to center on other patients, but my thoughts were chaotic and I struggled to focus. Hours elapsed, and just when I presumed the day was done, I received another communique from reception. Mr. Smith solicited my aid again. I sighed, bracing myself for what lay ahead. Upon entering his room, he was seated on the bed awaiting. The atmosphere in the chamber was distinct, something that caused my skin to tingle. "I'm pleased you came," he voiced softly. I endeavored to uphold a dispassionate demeanor. "I'm merely performing my duty, Mr. Smith." Yet he appeared unruffled by my detachment. Instead, he inclined slightly forward, and for an instant, I presumed he was about to utter something unsuitable. My heart pounded, but then, unexpectedly, the door flung open. It was the physician, unmindful of the peculiar tension in the chamber. He scanned some documents, entirely unaware of what had nearly transpired. I experienced a surge of relief as the doctor assumed control, affording me an opportunity to depart the room unobserved. As I traversed the hallway, I couldn't refrain from contemplating what might have occurred had the doctor not entered at that juncture. Was I prepared to permit the situation to intensify further? Would Mr. Smith breach boundaries even more? Yet as I persisted with my shift, another concern began to gnaw at me. The odd sensation that this wasn't concluded. The manner in which he gazed at me, the subtle touches. It all appeared to be a game I wasn't certain I desired to engage in. I completed my day and directed myself towards the exit, eager to depart the hospital and dismiss the entire episode. But as I approached the door, there stood Mr. Smith awaiting me. "I merely wish to converse," he stated, advancing a step closer. My pulse accelerated, but before I could react, I detected footfalls behind me. A colleague hailed me. I glanced at Mr. Smith, then swiftly pivoted and strode away, abandoning him there solitary, at least for the moment. As I hastened down the corridor, my heart throbbed in my chest. I persisted in pondering Mr. Smith and his peculiar conduct. A part of me yearned to disregard it, yet another part recognized there would be more. The subsequent day, I attempted to concentrate on my other patients, steering clear of Mr. Smith's room as much as feasible. But around midday, during a brief respite, I received another communication from reception. Mr. Smith requested my aid once more. I wavered before returning to his room. This time, I wasn't merely apprehensive. I was resolved to terminate any further unsuitable behavior. But the instant I crossed the threshold, I discerned something had altered. Mr. Smith sat, gazing out the window, his countenance inscrutable. The atmosphere in the room was peculiar, and for a moment, I entertained the notion that perhaps he intended to express regret for everything. Perhaps I had misinterpreted him. "I desire to speak with you," he remarked, not meeting my gaze. I lingered near the door, maintaining my distance. "Regarding what?" I inquired, gradually turning to encounter his stare. "Concerning what occurred earlier. I believe you comprehend what I'm alluding to." I swallowed, uncertain how to respond. "Mr. Smith, I'm here solely to assist you with your therapy." He smirked faintly, then inclined forward. "I believe we both recognize it's more than that," he asserted. Before I could utter a word, the door groaned open again. This time, it wasn't the doctor. It was his spouse. She entered, her eyes instantly darting between me and her husband. I could perceive the tension escalating even further. Her gaze was piercing as she evaluated the scene. "What's transpiring here?" she demanded in a strained voice. I retreated a step, my heart racing. "I'm merely departing," I stated, proceeding towards the door. But I could sense her eyes boring into my back as I exited the room. In the corridor, I endeavored to steady my breathing. What had just happened? Was Mr. Smith attempting to flirt with me directly in front of his wife? Or was something even more bizarre occurring? The remainder of my shift was a haze. Each time I passed his room, I could perceive the burden of what had transpired looming over me. But I wasn't certain if I feared Mr. Smith or his wife more. Just as I was about to conclude my day, I spotted her awaiting me at the reception. "I need to discuss something with you," she declared in an icy tone. My stomach plummeted. "Is there an issue?" She regarded me sternly, then motioned for me to accompany her down the corridor, away from other personnel. I reluctantly complied, feeling my nerves contorting into knots. When we were isolated, she pivoted towards me, folding her arms. "I'm aware of what you were up to with my husband," she stated. I blinked, astonished. What? No, that's not. Don't deceive me. She cut me off. I've observed how he gazes at you, how you conduct yourself around him. I shook my head, attempting to clarify. It's not what you assume. I'm merely his nurse. Her eyes constricted. I'm not foolish. He's been different since you began caring for him, and I know it's because of you. I opened my mouth to object again, but she didn't provide an opportunity. If you believe you can intervene between us, you're mistaken, she declared in a low, menacing tone. Keep away from my husband. With those words, she spun around and departed, leaving me standing there, shocked. I didn't know what to think. Mr. Smith had been behaving oddly, not me, but now his wife presumed there was something transpiring between us, and she evidently wasn't going to dismiss it. The ensuing days were strained. I steered clear of Mr. Smith as much as feasible, but the predicament burdened me greatly. I couldn't cease contemplating what his wife had stated or his peculiar demeanor. It felt as if I had been ensnared in a game I didn't desire to engage in. Then one evening, as I was about to exit the hospital, I encountered Mr. Smith again. He stood in the corridor, awaiting me. My heart dropped as I realized I couldn't dodge him this time. I need to converse with you, he said, advancing a step closer. I attempted to remain composed. Mr. Smith, I believe it's best if we maintain a professional demeanor. He disregarded me, his eyes earnest. I'm aware my wife conversed with you. I nodded, sensing a knot of apprehension in my chest. Yes, she did, and I believe it's best if we both distance ourselves from this circumstance. But instead of concurring, he grinned with a slow, disconcerting smile. She doesn't comprehend the half of it, he murmured. Before I could react, he extended his hand and seized my wrist. My heart throbbed in my ears as I withdrew my hand. What are you doing? I demanded, retreating. He smirked. You're not going to inform anyone, are you? I believe we both recognize how that would unfold. I experienced a surge of alarm. I'll report this, I stated, turning to depart. But as I reached the door, I froze. There, standing just outside the door, was Mr. Smith's wife, her expression indecipherable. She had clearly been there long enough to overhear part of our dialogue. My heart raced, and I abruptly felt ensnared between them. But instead of storming in or confronting us as I anticipated, she merely stood there, her eyes shifting between me and her husband. A somber part of me pondered if she knew, if she suspected something more significant. The tension in the atmosphere was stifling, and for an instant, I felt my determination falter. I despised acknowledging it, but something about Mr. Smith lingered in my thoughts. The manner in which he gazed at me, the subtle touches, and even the size of his instrument when I initially saw it. I attempted to dismiss that notion, reminding myself that it was incorrect, extremely incorrect, but my body had other intentions, and I couldn't refute that it had roused something within me. I turned back to Mr. Smith, who was still observing me with that identical smirk, as if he precisely understood what I was contemplating. I should have departed. I should have exited the room right then, but something restrained me there. The exhilaration of forbidden peril, the danger of being apprehended. It was intoxicating, even if I didn't desire to confess it to myself. His wife remained motionless, her eyes dark and calculating. I couldn't decipher her, and the ambiguity caused my skin to prickle. Did she know, or was she in the dark like me, uncertain of what to do next? Mr. Smith advanced a step closer, his voice low. She won't divulge anything. She recognizes better than to create a spectacle. My pulse accelerated. There was something in his voice that compelled me to repel him, yet also attract him. His presence was overwhelming, and I detested how it made me feel, as my mind and body were at variance with one another. Mr. Smith, I can't proceed with this, I murmured, more to persuade myself than him. But then he inclined closer, near enough for me to sense his breath on my nape. You're already present, he whispered, his hand brushing my waist, sending a quiver throughout my body. I ought to have nudged him away. I ought to have departed. Yet instead, I froze, my body betraying me as his digits slid over my skin. It was incorrect. Everything about it was incorrect, but there was a part of me that didn't desire to halt, that yearned to witness where this hazardous game would guide. That's when the door groaned, disrupting the instant. His spouse entered the chamber, her demeanor frosty, yet composed. "Is everything satisfactory here?" she inquired, her tone abnormally tranquil, abnormally controlled. I instantly retreated, my heart racing. "Yes, I was merely exiting," I faltered, attempting to reclaim command of the circumstance. But as I gazed at her, I could discern something in her eyes, a flicker of amusement or perhaps even endorsement. Did she recognize what nearly transpired? Or worse, did she desire it to occur? I seized my belongings and hastily departed, my thoughts whirling as I traversed the passageway. I couldn't dispel the sensation that I had narrowly evaded a calamity, but also that I had abandoned something incomplete. The encounter with Mr. Smith left me more bewildered than ever. My contemplations were consumed by him and what nearly happened, and despite everything, I couldn't deny that the notion still lingered in my mind. What was amiss with me? Why couldn't I simply dismiss him? But deep down, I comprehended the response. Peril, exhilaration, prohibited. It was thrilling, and now I wasn't certain if I desired to cease. I stepped into the corridor, my heart pounding. The encounter with Mr. Smith left me feeling both befuddled and invigorated, but I also felt as if I had narrowly eluded something perilous. Just as I turned to leave, I sensed a hand on my shoulder. I turned around and saw Mrs. Smith standing there, her expression fervent. "Wait," she stated, her voice unexpectedly tender. "We need to converse." Surprised, I nodded and accompanied her into a small, unoccupied office at the end of the hallway. She shut the door behind us, and I felt a surge of uncertainty. What did she desire? "I've observed the manner in which he gazes at you," she commenced, her voice low. "And I'm aware of what transpired just now. But I'm not here to intimidate you." My pulse hastened. "What do you imply?" She inhaled deeply, her eyes encountering mine. "I'm cognizant of the type of man Tom is, and I can assist you." "Assist me?" Bewildered, I questioned. "I'm not the woman you presume I am." "I'm not the woman you presume I am," she declared in a grave tone. "Tom possesses a dark aspect. He manipulates everyone surrounding him. I've been observing you, and I can perceive that he covets you for himself." That's when I felt a shudder course down my spine. "Why do you desire to aid me?" "Because I wish to expose him. I wish to reveal the truth to you. He's deceived both of us." Before I could react, she extracted a folder from her bag and handed it to me. I opened it and discovered documents and photographs of Mr. Smith, disclosing a facet of him I had never witnessed before. "Behold his genuine nature," she insisted, "and then determine if you wish to be entangled with him." Abruptly, everything became clear. The tension, the peculiar glimpses, the thrill, it had all been a game to him, and I was merely a pawn. But then Mrs. Smith smiled, a knowing glance in her eyes. "You see, it's not merely about you or me. It's about influence, and I'm not willing to relinquish mine." In that instant, I realized I had been ensnared, and the genuine game was only just commencing.